Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Cie, the art and science of watch collection. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different with this our little vest pocket video, and that is to take a look at the design of the Heritage Pilot's Watch. I'm going to start off with, I suppose, no matter what I start off with, someone will say, well, gee, I know something that came 2 years earlier, so bear with me. Back in 1909, wearing a watch called the Zenith Special, Bleriot flew across the English Channel, and so that sort of became a real root of that, of the later Zenith Pilot Special and Extra Special pilot watches they had. But another one I think is equally important is the original 1918 Longines chronograph. And there are many similarities between the Zenith Special, by the way, and the chronograph, and then the Longines Heritage 1918, which came out just a few years ago, that was based on the original 1918 chronograph. And some of the things that we can look at are the large numbers. Now, for a pilot's watch, for a real pilot, you want to be able to glance at your watch, especially with the older airplanes that you had the wind blowing in your face and so forth. And you had to wear a big jacket and gloves and so forth because it got very cold. They weren't heated. And so big numbers, big fat hands. The hands they used, I wasn't quite sure how they selected though, but on both the Zenith Special and the Longines 1918 chronograph, the hour hands are what are called cathedral hands. They had the little lines around, looks something like a cathedral window, I guess, a stained glass window. And then on the minute hands, they had what's called a syringe hand, which has this little pointer that goes right to it. Now, they may have had it that way for keeping a close eye on the minutes. Having been a pilot myself at one time, even when I flew, it wasn't that long ago, but it was one of the most important things that a pilot could do with a watch is to watch the time. Because when you fill up your tank with gas on an airplane, you fill it up in terms of the number of hours. And so maybe it would take, I'm trying to think what we had. I'd fill it up and had maybe, let's say, 7 or 8 hours to fly. Now, I think we used to fly about 150 miles an hour, something like that in the plane. I had a little single-engine Cessna. And the planes back then, in the older days, they were a lot slower, but they weren't as fuel efficient or anything else. And so timing was essential primarily for keeping an eye on your fuel. Now, 1921, there was a Vacheron Constantin came out with a watch with a very, very similar kind of hands and dial. On the upper right-hand corner, the original Vacheron Constantin, 1921, I've got my modern one here. They had a winding crown off to the side. Now, this one was considered maybe more of a driving watch. I'm not sure what it was. They didn't make that many of them, but they did have exactly the same kind of big numbers and so forth, and they had the cathedral and syringe hands on them. The font is called Super Magnata font, and it's a great big font, and you can see that the hands are very similar. Now, when they came out with a modern one, I think this came out in 2013, they had brigade hands and brigade numbers, so it wasn't at all like the original in terms of the shape. And so what I'm trying to follow is the sort of the heritage, the pilot heritage part, but this watch had so much in common with it. Now, in in 1938, IWC came out with a watch. Another one is very similar. It had the big super magnata hand numbers on it. Had this cathedral hands, the syringe hands. Now this watch was made by a couple of the sons of the guy who owned IWC, Ernest Jacob Homburger. And if you look at that, you can see again, you can see that style coming through of what we call a heritage pilot's style. Now, in looking at the modern ones today, there are, and some of the older ones too, have a lot of similarities. H. Moser came out with a whole line of heritage watches, and they have not, I wouldn't say it's a cathedral hand nor the syringe hand. They have, I'm not quite sure what the name of those hands are, but they're pretty good sized hands. They're not little skinny ones. The Longines Aviation Watch Type A. This one has very much has the style of the heritage style. The Patek Philippe Pilot's Travel Time watch also has the same one. Says that their hands on the Patek Philippe and on the H. Moser are very similar to those. Not quite sure what they're called, sword-like hands, I guess. And then they have a skeleton hand for the, I guess you could call it the GMT time, or what pilots would call the Zulu time on it. The Zenith Extra Special pilot watch, they use that same Zenith Special name that Bleriot had when he crossed the English Channel, which I thought was sort of interesting. But now they call them Extra Special, and that's where the name came from. Anyway, I thought there's sort of an interesting little history on heritage pilot watches. The big crowns, the ones that stuck out, were so that you got gloves on and goggles, and you're trying to wind the thing, make sure you got the right time so you don't run out of gas. Anyway, let me know what you think, and if you have one of these watches, I'd love to hear from you. It's a good time to subscribe if you'd like, and until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.